going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Steelers Saturday SitDAHN here with Around the 412. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Tyler Weeks. What's going on?
Oh, nothing, man. Had a pretty good Thanksgiving on Thursday, and yesterday might have been my laziest day I have had in a very, very long time. Had the day off of work.
Love to hear it.
I get a 4-day weekend. But ate some Thanksgiving leftovers. Had a lazy day with my wife, who is 9 months pregnant, and we go in next week to have our kid. Actually, on Monday, is when we go in for our induction. So we're kind of enjoying the last weekend of just the two of us, and because there's not going to be many days where we can do what we did, where we literally just sat on the couch and hung out and watched TV all day. And so we were able to enjoy that yesterday. And so this is actually going to be, assuming she doesn't come early, my last Steelers game without a kid in my life. So
yeah,
it's going to be a Steelers game of no interruption and full enjoyment, because after that I'll have other responsibilities to take care of. But I'm doing good. This weekend is off to a good start. Like I said, 4-day weekend for me. So hopefully it keeps going football wise. I mean, if you're a college football fan, if you watched that Georgia Tech game yesterday, it's already a great start to the weekend. I mean, that was an entertaining game, to say the least. I'm sad Georgia Tech didn't pull it out, because I'm always game for an upset as long as it's not against my actual team. But man, what a start to the weekend as far as football in general goes. More college football today, and then you get some NFL. I mean, you did get some NFL on Thursday and Friday as well. The Chiefs remain to be the luckiest team in the NFL. They are the most fraudulent 10-1 I've ever seen. I
mean, the 2020 Steelers certainly have a case.
Well, they were 11-0. This is 10-1.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah. Right. They've lost. The Steelers were the most fraudulent 11-0. We saw a coach firing on technically on Friday, but because of the decision making on Thursday, Matt Eberflus fired from the Chicago Bears. I can't believe what I watched in that final play. It was an absolute disaster. The play clock management made Mike Tomlin look like the best play clock manager of all time.
Yeah, I don't care what people say about Mike Tomlin's clock management. That would never happen. Like, there is no, and I mean, that's such a low bar to have. It certainly is Mike Tomlin's, in my opinion, worst aspect is the way that he manages the clock. I'm convinced that like kids that are like 12 years old that play Madden would run better clocks than a lot of coaches in the NFL. Like, yeah. It's crazy, but it's not just like that was some of the worst that I've seen. But like, you look lead wide and it's awful. In that way that it happened. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's so few coaches that are actually good at managing the clock now. It's insane. By the way, we had like 3 comments before we even started. Monongahela Mike in here. Tina's in here from Indiana, and Monongahela Mike's out in Idaho. So the eyes have it, according to him. We already got a prediction as well. 28-24 Steelers, says Tina. Boston's here. Kobe's here. Matt is here. Appreciate you guys being in here already. We'll certainly get to some comments and questions if you guys have them as we go throughout. But yeah, hope everybody had a fantastic Thanksgiving and their weekend's off to a good start. Even if you mentioned some sports stuff, man, if you're a fan of the other Pittsburgh sports teams, whether it's Pitt Hoops, what a thrilling game against Ohio State. Felt like I was watching an NCAA tournament game. Zach Austin with a buzzer beater. And then the Penguins getting a win, much needed, over the Boston Bruins on Friday. So if you are a fan of other teams, you're off to a good weekend as well. You mentioned you're having a baby on Monday, going for the induction. We had a new addition in the family 48 hours before Thanksgiving. My younger sister, giving birth to her first. So Cammie joined in the family right before the holiday. Was awesome. We went over there on Thanksgiving night, spent some time with her. But
yeah, Donnie was looking kind of yoked in the picture.
I saw you comment that on Facebook, and we were actually laughing about it at dinner last night. It got brought up because somebody that we work with, I sent pictures like me holding the baby, my dad, like the entire family holding the baby, and they replied and said, "Is your dad thinning out a little bit?" And I was like, "Not that I know of. I mean, I don't know. I see him every day, so yeah, I don't know. If he's losing weight, I'm finding it." So. That's what
his baby holding form is on point, and I think he just knows how to do it right, where his shoulders and his arms just look absolutely jacked.
Yeah. To Kobe's point about the Chiefs, it does seem a lot more fluky. Like, you have a blocked field goal against the Broncos yesterday. I mean, just ridiculous with the Raiders. fumbling that snap, and also it looked like it was blown dead. And then if that's the case, if it's a pre-snap penalty and should have been blown dead, then it doesn't matter what happened after the snap. So the Chiefs recovering the fumble should have been null and void and just a 5-yard penalty on the Raiders. But I don't know. Yeah, every single week it's something different than the way that the Chiefs are winning. I just keep waiting for them to have like a 500-yard offensive outburst where they score 40+ points and be like, okay, the Chiefs are fully back. And each week it doesn't happen and they win by 1 or 2 points, barely sneaking by where the other team has a chance at the end and somehow messes it up. But here we are. Maybe that happens on Christmas. Who knows? When the Steelers host the Kansas City.
Come on. Why you got to bring that in the air?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean in that way. I meant finally they lose a game that it looks like
okay
at the end of the game. Yeah, sorry. I mentioned the offensive outburst. Yeah, I do not want that to happen on Christmas. I'd prefer that happen literally the week right before. That way it's like out of their system and they don't do it again. Yeah. Although I guess you could argue, are they back on track now and we'd be worried about it happening against us? I don't know. Either way, this does not look like the same Kansas City Chiefs to me. I'll throw this out there right now and to come back to bite me. Freezing cold takes if you want. I don't think this team makes the AFC Championship game.
I like that. Yeah, my pick for the Super Bowl this whole time, throughout the start of this. Well, I shouldn't say start of the season. We're all halfway through the season, but throughout the season has been Lions Bills. So I like that they're not making the AFC Championship game.
If I'm picking it right now, yeah, that's where I'm at. I think there's right now 4 or 5 teams that I think could win the Super Bowl. I still think the Chiefs are in there because they could turn it on any time, but just the way that they've looked week in and week out, I don't even think they make it to the AFC Championship game. But they could win the Super. As weird as that, dumb as that might sound coming out of my mouth, I think they could win the Super Bowl, but I'm not even picking them to get to the AFC Championship game. The way they look.
Yeah. And you know what? I was having this discussion with my brother-in-law. And I think that there's some credence to it. Not that I think that the NFL would have them try to get to the Super Bowl in any way. Like I'm not trying to say it's fixed at all. Like I understand that human error happens with the officials and everything like that, but I'm not trying to say that there's an agenda to get the Chiefs to win or get to them to the Super Bowl. But as much as people might disagree with this, the people who are going to want a three-peat for the Kansas City Chiefs are obviously Chiefs fans and the NFL, because everybody, if you look at any sport, there are more eyeballs on it when there's dynasties than when there's not. And I think the NFL, if they had a three-peat champion, whether it's going to be hate watching or whether it's going to be loving the Chiefs, it's going to bring the most eyeballs to the Super Bowl as possible if the Chiefs are in it. And so I think the NFL would want the Chiefs to be in the Super Bowl for that fact.
Okay, well, NFL, listen in on this. All right. The Steelers are your most popular organization. I don't care what the Cowboys say. The Steelers are the most popular organization. Let's start it this year. Let's get the Steelers in there and then 3 in a row. The Pittsburgh Steelers. That's what we want to happen.
I like that.
So, yeah, you're not getting it this year. You're not getting the three-peat that you want this year. You're not getting that dynasty rolling yet, but it starts this year. No, but seriously, we haven't talked a lick about this game that the Steelers actually play against the Cincinnati Bengals coming up this Sunday. It's been a while since we actually talked about previewing a game, because last Saturday we obviously talked about the loss to Cleveland. The Steelers trying to right the ship this week, get back on the horse, and get the ball rolling again. You look around the league, though, and I just said I want to talk about this game, but I got to mention one more thing here, because that Dolphins loss on Thanksgiving, I don't think people realize how impactful that was. Because now you look at the teams that are sitting outside of the wild cards right now, the least amount of losses they have are 7. That's the Colts, the Dolphins, and the Cincinnati Bengals. So even if the Bengals were to win and go to 5-7, the most wins that any of those teams could have is 10. If the Steelers win 2 more games, they're at 10. So it's going like mathematically, it kind of feels like the AFC teams, not necessarily the seeding, is already pretty much figured out.
Yeah, it's kind of cannibalism a little bit with the AFC, like a lot of teams beating each other to kind of align things in a certain way. I think that there's definitely way more parity looking at the NFC. Like obviously the Lions are number 1 right now, but I think there's more parity as far as like where the final standings could be. It seems like we already know the teams that are going to be in the playoffs for the AFC. Might be tweaked like a spot or two with like the wild cards, but it almost seems like the champions of each division and then who the wild card teams are going to be are almost set in stone. I just feel like with the Broncos in the 7th seed. I don't think that any of the teams behind them, unless they go on some like miraculous run and the Broncos fall off, I don't think that there's going to be a like serious contender. I mean, even this game against the Bengals, like the Bengals have to play the Steelers twice and they still have to play the Broncos, 2 teams that are currently in the playoffs right now. The Bengals would probably have to win every single game the rest of the season in order to make it. And then that's the way for most of these in the hunt teams. And so, yeah, we kind of already know who the 7 teams in the AFC are going to be. Tweak out a little bit of seeding, but you're pretty much looking at your playoff picture right now.
My prediction, because I think the Bengals are the one team outside that could get in. It would obviously take the Broncos kind of falling off, and you look at their remaining schedule. I know that they play each other as well, but they have Colts, Chargers, Browns, Colts, Chargers, Bengals, Chiefs. Like that is a tough set of games right there. My prediction is one of the Chargers or Broncos fall out, and the Bengals end up being in.
Man, I hate 9-8. I hate that because I know we probably shouldn't say stuff like this, but there's a team that scares me that's not in the playoff mix right now. It's the Bengals for how explosive their team is.
As a 7 seed, yeah, that's as like good of a 7 seed I feel like as you could have.
Like if I'm the 2 seed, I don't want to play the Bengals as a 7 seed.
Yeah, I mean, give me the Broncos or Chargers certainly over them. But let's talk about why that's the case. Let's dive into this game and the challenges that the Bengals represent. Spent a lot of time looking at this one and just the challenges that this Bengals passing attack can present. But the thing is, we haven't seen a ton of Burrow, Chase, and Higgins together, right? Like not even just this season, like over the years, T. Higgins has not been the healthiest guy. Joe Burrow obviously missed better parts of 2 different seasons. Jamar Chase only played in 1 game against the Steelers last year. Like these 3 that collectively have not played a ton against the Steelers, but when they've all been on the field, they've been very good. They've presented the biggest challenge to the Steelers, certainly within the division. And I think it's their ability to spread things out. Like they can go 5 wide in covering those 2 guys, plus the complementary pieces that they've had, at least in the past. You know, Tyler Boyd no longer there, but he was a mainstay for a long time. I really like Mike Gesicki and Andre Yoshevach and what they can do. They have a rookie in Jermaine Burton who hasn't gotten on the field a ton, at least in 3 wide receiver sets. But I believe that this offense is the one offense within the division that gives the Steelers problems. Like we've seen them be able to figure out how to defend the Ravens and the Browns. I think this offseason to me was going to be what pieces do they bring in to answer the questions about the challenges that the Bengals offense presents. When you bring in guys like Patrick Queen, Deshaun Elliott, Dante Jackson, even through the draft, Peyton Wilson, undrafted free agent Beanie Bishop, this is going to be their first time seeing this team. And I'm curious to see how those guys on that defense, the ability to now cover more blades of grass and cover sideline to sideline, impact the way that this team can defend the Bengals offense.
Yeah, and they're going to have their work cut out for them. Like, there's so many weapons on this Bengals offense, and like you mentioned, they haven't all been playing together. Even in games where they've played the Steelers, they haven't really historically all been together like they are right now. And just so many weapons. But I do think the Steelers are better adapted to be able to defend it than they were in seasons past as far as like personnel goes. Like, I think a huge addition for this game is going to be Patrick Queen, the ability to be sideline to sideline like that. I think that that's going to be a big factor in some of the dump offs that Joe Burrow could have in this game, as well as like Joe Burrow himself. Like, I feel like you don't look at Joe Burrow and think he's a mobile quarterback, which I wouldn't call him a mobile quarterback, but he can get first down. He can get yardage if he needs to and get outside the pocket. And having a linebacker that can move sideline to sideline like that, and Peyton Wilson too, their ability to use their speed like that, I feel like that's going to be a big factor into this game, is how they contain Joe Burrow himself, as well as some of the running backs and dump offs out of the backfield as well in the passing game. There's not a lot about I got to be honest, there's not a lot about their running game that really scares me. I looked into this, and whenever they play a top half running defense, they are below 100 yards a game. They're like around 60, 70, 80 yards a game. And whenever they're playing a bottom half rush defense, and most of the teams that they've played that are at bottom half or bottom 10, they have over 100 yards a game. So there's not a ton that actually scares me about their rushing attack, considering how well Pittsburgh has played against the run. I mean, they're top 2 in the NFL right now and yards allowed on the ground. And so I think the focus to me is going to be through the air, but I think where the running backs could hurt you is like what I mentioned in those dump offs. You get the eyes down the field and all the distractions down there. Running back leaks out. That could burn the Steelers. I mean, we see someone like Jaylen Warren do that for the Steelers. That could happen against them, and so I think that's something that having Queen, having Wilson, that's something that's going to help in that aspect. But all of this is going to be through the air in my mind. I feel like the Steelers are going to shut down their running attack because of what I just mentioned. And that's where the game is really going to open up. And we'll talk about the offense too, but like this game could be considered more of a shootout. Like, and if the Steelers are going to be letting up a ton of scores defensively, how confident do we feel about the offense's ability to be able to keep up in a game like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give my answer necessarily on that right right now.
More of a rhetorical question right now. But.
Right, yeah. Brandon said, to put in perspective about this matchup, I don't believe Burrow has lost this year since his rookie year. They lost in 22, the season opener in Cincinnati. He threw 4 picks in that game, also had 338 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. The Bengals still probably win that game, though, if their long snapper wasn't hurt. That is ultimately what changed the course of that game, like a missed kick and then Minka blocks one. Obviously, we end up going on to win in overtime. Just a really weird game. And that was the game, TJ partially tore his pec and then missed like the next 8 games or whatever it was. But yeah, so Burrow against the Steelers, he's played in 5 games, 11 touchdowns, but 8 interceptions as well. I mentioned he had a 4 interception game within there in that 2022 opener. Averages 253 passing yards per game. But yeah, so he lost his rookie year and then lost in 22. So he's 3-2 in the 5 games that he's played against the Steelers. But again, like also having T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, that hasn't been that 2020 game, his rookie year, that he would have lost to us. Jamar Chase not in the fold yet. Jamar Chase didn't play in one of the games last year against us. Burrow didn't play in either of the games last year against us because they were both in the back half of the season when he had already been injured. So, yeah, I don't know. I look at what this offense can do. You mentioned the running game. I actually like Chase Brown quite a bit. I think their struggles within the run game are more about the offensive line than it is the running back. I think Chase Brown's a pretty talented dude. They brought in Khalil Herbert as well at the trade deadline from the Bears after Zach Moss suffered an injury. So, but offensively, total yards per game, 366. That's 11th. Passing yards, 262.7. That is first in the NFL. 27th in rushing yards per game, 91.5. They're the 6th best scoring offense at 27 points per game. And this is really the number that stands out to me. 5th third down percentage at 45%. So very good on the money downs on third down, which is where the Steelers, despite how good they've been defensively, 33% on third down, which is 4th best in the NFL. That's going to be what defines this game to me, is the Steelers being able to get off the field on third down. With how good Cincinnati is, with how good the Steelers defense has been in that regard, they're going to have to be as good as they've been there now against one of the best teams in the NFL. 17th in passing yards allowed per game for the Steelers at 214.9. Big test this week. I'm curious to see how they match up, and I want to get your opinion on how they're going to match up here. Do you shadow Jamar Chase? Do you shadow T. Higgins and let everybody else deal with Jamar Chase? Like, how do you go about defending those 2 receivers? I have my answer here, but I'm curious to see if you're on the same page.
So for me, and this may be opposite of what the natural reaction would do, I would shadow T. Higgins to make sure he's shut down, because historically he's played well against the Steelers. I think he's gone over 100 yards in almost every game he's played against the Steelers. And I would shadow him and then just let the secondary cover Jamar Chase by committee. If you want to have Joey Porter Jr. on T. Higgins, if you want to shadow him that way, and then have everybody else worry about Jamar Chase, that's what I would do. Because historically in the Steelers and Bengals,
Higgins averages 95 receiving yards against the Steelers. Yeah.
So I would take away him just because he hasn't been on the field a ton this season, especially with Jamar Chase. And so when you have both of them out there, Jamar Chase it's almost like playing a number 1 receiver where he's going to get his. You just got to limit everything else around him. And that's kind of how I would view it. Jamar Chase is going to get his yards, cover him by committee, and then take away the second best threat in T. Higgins. Because I find it hard to Like if Joey Porter Jr. is shadowing Jamar Chase, especially in recent weeks, Joey has struggled a little bit in coverage. And if he starts to get handsy with Jamar Chase as well, that could not work out on the back end for Joey. And so that's why I'd cover T. Higgins and then have everybody else try to cover Jamar Chase. But it's kind of like a scenario where you are just let the number one guy get his a little bit, but cover everybody else around him. That's kind of how I view it, because I feel like no matter what, whether you shadow Jamar or not, he's going to get his yardage.
To me, I mean, I agree. Actually, I think it comes down to body type for me more than anything else. Like Jamar's the type of receiver that's going to give Joey fits. I think athletically and just like the way that their bodies line up, like T. Higgins presents a much more the matchup that you would think Joey would be able to take on. Like those two against each other, that's going to be a really good battle, in my opinion. But just like the athletic profile, I think lines up with what he should be shadowing more anyway. Like Jamar, I don't know what you do. You have Dante Jackson for the most part move around with him if he shifts into the slot? Do you see Cam Sutton as opposed to Beanie Bishop in that regard? Do you use Minkah Fitzpatrick in that way? Like to me, this is going to be a game where, like, I know people have been waiting for the splash from Minkah Fitzpatrick, but if we look at the end of the game, the Steelers win this game and they relatively held both those receivers in check. It's going to be because of what Minkah Fitzpatrick was able to do in the way that he was deployed in this one. So I actually agree with you. I would use Joey pretty much shadowing T. Higgins and then commit a ton of resources on the back end to Jamar Chase from other players. So again, maybe you're leaving yourself open to Mike Gesicki or Andre Yoshivas or somebody having a big game. If you do that, I think that you got to take, I mean, like somebody within that offense is going to have to get theirs. When you have guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and they're both healthy, what that can do for everybody else, the looks that they're going to get, are the Bengals going to be able to take advantage of it is the question here. But yeah, Alan and I had this conversation on Afternoon Drive, and he basically said the same thing. Like Joey and T. Higgins makes sense as a matchup, and then you commit a lot of other resources to Jamar Chase. T. Higgins, as I mentioned, averages 95 yards per game, and that is weighed down a lot by that 2022 opener I just mentioned that the Steelers won. He had 2 catches in the first quarter before he left with an injury. So he had 27 yards in that game, which obviously is going to bring the average way down. So, yeah, he's gone off against the Steelers a lot. 115 yards, just 31 yards in a game in 2020, their second matchup. 114 yards, the 27 I just mentioned on 2 catches. 148 yards, 140 yards. So T. Higgins has certainly gotten his against the Steelers. And again, last year wouldn't have had Joe Burrow either. It was Jake Browning playing quarterback against the Steelers. So be interesting to see the way that they defend him in that regard. We've talked a lot about the Steelers defense and defending the Bengals offense, but the other way, we mentioned that this is going to be a shootout. The Steelers are going to have to put up points offensively. Do we trust them to do so? Let's look at their offensive numbers compared to the Bengals defense just on the surface. The Steelers offense, 18 in yards per game, 347, 26th in passing yards per game, 192.8. 8th in rushing, 135.2, 14th in points, 22.9, and they are 15th in their third down percentage, 38.9, against a Bengals defense that is bottom 12 at best in everything. The best thing that they do is stop the run, and they're still 20th at that, 129.8 yards per game. They allow the 8th most yards per game, 365.9. They're 23rd against the pass, 225.6. I already mentioned the rushing, 26.9 points per game, which is 28th in the NFL. And then they allow third down conversions 44.4% of the time, which is 27th in the NFL. So this is a really bad defense. And I don't understand, like, if you just look on paper, it's kind of hard to figure out why they've regressed this hard. Is it more about, is it the personnel? Did they maybe over-evaluate their own ability to replace a guy like Jesse Bates on the back end of things, who was so important for what they do? Is it because of the pieces that they've lost on the interior of their defensive line over the last few years? Like, they still have the same linebackers. The corners are, like, DJ Turner's hurt now, but they've had issues on the back end even at the beginning of the year. Cam Taylor-Britt's been very up and down. I feel like the conversation surrounding him is very parallel to like Martin Emerson in Cleveland, who was awesome last year, and then this year, like, can't figure out what's going on, why he hasn't been as good. Mike Hilton's obviously is what he is. You know, he's a really good player in terms of what he can do off the edge and run support and stuff like that. And he's an okay player in coverage, but you can certainly get him And then the back end, they spent a lot of money on a guy like Geno Stone, who had a ton of interceptions in Baltimore, but he hasn't been very good in coverage either. So, like, what to you do you think is the reason for this Bengals regression? Is it the personnel? Is it communication? What exactly is going on there?
I think a part of it was definitely personnel, the ability to replace Jesse Bates, and their secondary has not been good. They've given up a ton of yards per game through the air, and I think that the Steelers are going to attack this defense. I think there's capabilities in both areas, like on the ground and through the air, but I just don't think that the secondary is very good. I think that, and that's something we said about the Ravens defense, and I know that on paper at the time, the Ravens defense was worse through the air than the Bengals have been. But I just think that the Steelers' ability to pass the ball down the field and have some of those moonball plays, if you will, I think that's going to be there on Sunday. But I do think that the Steelers have the ability to run the ball as well. Like you mentioned, some of the interior defensive linemen, they haven't been replaced. Like Trey Hendrickson, still one of the best edge rushers in the league. And is he still leading the league in sacks right now? Yeah. So he's still one of the best. But so they've got some guys on their defense. But overall, I just don't think that there's a lot of talent on their defense, especially in key areas like in the middle of that defensive line in the secondary. I don't think that they did a good job of replacing those guys. And that's partially probably on the Bengals, just their ability to actually make those moves in the offseason and be able to come back with a better defense. I think they missed on that. And then as a team, that sometimes happens. You win some, you lose some, and you kind of got to live with the consequences. There's a reason why the Bengals right now are a top 5 scoring offense, but then you have a record of 4-7 right now. It would be frustrating to me being a Bengals fan because I feel like they are as a team in a state where the 2014 to 17 Steelers were, where they could put up points for days, but they can't stop anybody. And so that's why they have a losing record. That's why that some of these games get away from them, even in games where it looks like they probably should have won. Their defense just can't get a stop. I think that the Steelers have an opportunity to attack that. I think that this could be a big George Pickens game, which literally is every single game. But in reality, I do think that he's got a chance to have a big game in this one. But I do think that the ground game could be better than what we saw in recent weeks. I think that Najee has the opportunity to get going in this one, like we haven't seen him in a few weeks. Jaylen Warren also had a good game against the Browns. I think he can continue to do that in this one. There's just not a lot that inspires me about this Bengals defense. That's the reason that I think that I think the game will be closer than I originally would think if I'm just looking at the Bengals offense. Despite how good the Steelers defense is, if I'm just looking at the Bengals offense, I'm having trouble thinking of how the Steelers are going to stay in this game. But when I look at how bad this Bengals defense has been at time, and especially in clutch moments too, I think that the Steelers have an opportunity to take advantage of that. However, I do think that they need to take advantage of it. I think that the Steelers need to not shoot themselves in the foot. They need to play smart and need to capitalize on it. If they play the same offense that they have in recent weeks, I don't know that that's going to be enough when they go to Cincinnati, because I feel like they are not going to be able to beat themselves while also beating the Bengals because of the offense that's on the other side of the field.
Yeah, so Kobe here mentioned think Bates was able to cover up a lot of their secondary issues, but to be real, has their defense ever been all that great the past 3 or 4 years? I think like Lou Anarumo, who's their defensive coordinator, especially in the 2020 when they had the Super Bowl run, their defense in the playoffs that year was awesome. And maybe it was more so the steam than it was the players within it. And maybe the league has caught up a bit to Lou Anarumo and he hasn't been able to punch back. I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't think that the loss of Jesse Bates makes this much of an impact. I mean, very good player, obviously, but to this degree, that'd be pretty insane to think about that he is the sole reason that we've seen this defense fall off. Again, you still have Trey Hendrickson, who's one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. You still have a really good linebacker trio that they can deploy. And Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, and Akeem Davis-Gaither. And Cam Taylor-Britt still there. I don't know what's going on with him. Geno Stone led the league in picks just a couple years ago for the Ravens. It's insane to me to see this regression. But again, I don't think that they were ever an elite unit, but I do think they had an elite playoff run. the year that they went to the Super Bowl that probably raised expectation for what that defense was.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I don't think they were ever high end as far as like you look at the Steelers, right? Like you've got elite guys at every phase of the game. I don't know that they were ever like the Steelers in that facet, but I thought they had a lot of really good guys
Yeah,
overall on
and
the
they,
defense. Like when
that
you look at that
playoff
Super Bowl
run,
run.
yeah, they allowed like 16 points per game. Like, everybody was talking about like Joe Burrow in his first full season or whatever it was like that. But like you look at what the defense was doing, that's the reason they were in the Super Bowl that year was the defense.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike Hilton washed, unfortunately.
He's going to be part of my bold prediction, actually.
Oh, really?
But yeah, so you said a lot of good things in there. I think about the offense. Also, like you look at what like Pat Freiermuth did in Cincinnati last year, and think that that's possible again. Like this just feels like this has to be and should be an offensive breakout for this team that desperately needs it, especially after what we just saw in the last game against Cleveland. Like we need to see a bounce back performance here from this offense, and like they've had the ability to move the ball to a degree, but we've mentioned this before, like the short yardage, the money downs, that is where they're not getting it done right now.
In the red
like
zone.
Whether it's in the red zone. Yeah. Like, so third down and short, fourth down and short when they go for it in the red zone. This team has not, they're coming up small right now. What is the way to improve that? Because they're going to have to be better in those areas, but also because if you're an offense like them that doesn't necessarily have the personnel that can make up for, you got to stay ahead of the sticks. Like if they take a pre-snap penalty or something that sets the drive back, we just assume that the drive is over, right? So like from 20 to 20, it seems like the offense has been. It's funny that Kobe just put that in there, as I was saying. From the 20-yard line to the 20-yard line, they've been okay, but then they get inside and it turns into, you know what? I'm just going to read his comment. Once they get inside the 20, it's rough. Yeah, we haven't seen this offense be able to finish drives, and that is what needs to change, because especially in this game, like this is one where they're going to have to put up points. We keep saying it, but it really feels like. Normally we talk about like what a race to like 20, 21 when you're talking about the Steelers defense that's typically able to hold opponents under that. This is more like 30 something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like they're going to have to get into the 30s to be able to win this football game. Which with this offense, what we've seen recently might be kind of hard to see, but then you look at the way the Bengals have played defense this entire season, and it's not so hard to see. Like even if the Bengals get a lead and the Steelers have to go into like just pass, like we talked about the weaknesses of the secondary, the communication issues they've had. They've given up the most explosive plays through the air this year of any team in the NFL. This is a defense that you can certainly be able to come back against. Again, as the Steelers offense, one that can take advantage of that. So, yeah, I like it. And you mentioned the Najee Harris stuff. Brian, here with a comment about Najee. Can we have a 3rd and 1 play where Najee doesn't line up 20 yards behind the line? Dude, it drives me nuts. Yeah, like you're turning a 3rd and 1 into like a 3rd and 7 with the formation that you're coming out of in those. That is, I understand. Like, I don't want to get into a situation where it just becomes gimmicky and you're seeing him on the field like every other down or whatever like that. And certainly he has to be able to pass out of these situations too. But like Justin Fields, like that is where you should be using him. Is it 3rd and 4th and 1 yard to go? Like, man, in the time that they do it, right? I don't know if it was like the second drive of the game or whatever. They let him run a 4th down, and it's just, I mean, blown up immediately going to the right side. It's just like a quarterback power. But they get the play call in. Yeah, they get the play call in with like 6 seconds left. So that is what Tomlin, like they said they were working on that this week. He like called out the coaches for that being the case, the way that they've been so bad in the short yardage areas. So they've worked on that a ton this week. I know we'll see if it comes to fruition where they improve in that area on Sunday. They're certainly going to have to. Let's get into some predictions here before we get out of here. We want yours as well. So if you're in the live chat, let us know what your predictions are for this game, as well as if you want to throw a bold one out there, whether it's a player prop or whatever. Tyler, what are you thinking?
Okay, so bold predictions, I typically go all sides of the ball on this one. My defensive bold prediction, and I've thought about this kind of all week, to be honest with you. I've been feeling this one brewing in me for the majority of this week. I think that TJ Watt is going to have a big game in this one. We've talked about him on last week's actually, it might have been last week's Steelers Saturday SitDAHN.
It would have been.
That we were talking about him because we didn't have a Steelers show this week because of the timing of the games. How they weren't using him as far as moving him around. They weren't, and he hasn't had a big impact in like several weeks. And so I'm going to say TJ Watt over 2 sacks in this game. So whether it's 2.5 or 3, I'm going to say over 2.5 or over 2 sacks in this game. I think he's going to have a big impact. And that's another thing where and this is actually going to play into my offensive prediction as well. I think the Steelers are going to be the opposite of what we saw in Cleveland, or I think the Steelers are going to be the one who sets the tone at the line of scrimmage. In Cleveland, Cleveland was definitely the team that set the tone at the line of scrimmage. They won on both sides of the ball. I think the Steelers are going to set that tone this week. I don't think the offensive line for the Bengals is that great, even though it hasn't proved since Joe Burrow was a rookie. Still don't think it's that great. I think they're going to be able to get after him. I think that TJ Watt's going to have a big day on the ground and be able to kind of revitalize some of the image of TJ Watt, because I feel like it's been hurt the last few weeks, if I'm being completely honest with you. And then on the flip side of that, on the offense, I think that the offensive line is going to have a way better performance than they did in Cleveland. I think that the defensive line for the Bengals, outside of Trey Hendrickson, does not scare me at all. And even in this facet, I don't think in the run, Trey Hendrickson is going to have as big of an impact as he would as a pass rusher. I'm going to say that the Steelers run for 3 touchdowns in this game. I'm not going to say who, but I think that there's going to be 3 rushing touchdowns in this game. I think that you're going to see potentially Justin Fields get one. I know I predicted that a few weeks ago. Actually, I will predict that. Justin Fields going to get a short yardage red zone touchdown in this one, but also there's going to be 3 rushing touchdowns on the day. And I'm also going to predict less than 1.5 field goals for Chris Boswell.
Okay.
So the over under 1.5, less than 1.5.
Okay. Your defensive bold prediction involves TJ Watt. Mine is going to as well, but in a different way. We've seen it before. He's done this more to Joe Burrow than anybody. TJ Watt interception at the line of scrimmage. He's done it twice to him in the past. It's going to happen again. Actually, he did it twice to him in 22. And TJ only played 6 games that year, something like that. That was the year that he partially tore his pec. And then he did it again when he came back from injury. So TJ Watt interception at the line of scrimmage is my bold prediction for the defense. My offensive bold prediction, and this is very in-depth. Let me paint you a picture on the way that one of these is going to go down. George Pickens is going to have 2 touchdown receptions in this game. One of those, somehow, some way, it ends up Mike Hilton is the defender. When George Pickens catches the touchdown, he's going to hand the ball to Mike Hilton and give him the too small reaction.
That'd be too good. That would be too good. I mean, that would go into my Mike Hilton washed. That would play into that. That would be awesome.
That one's going to go back to just the communication issues they've had in the back end. Clearly, that's not a matchup that Cincinnati ever wants to have. But they've just been, again, on the back end this year, for whatever reason, they just cannot get things right, and they're allowing a ton of explosives down the field. Somehow, some way, Mike Hilton ends up being the closest defender on George Pickens on a touchdown reception, and that plays out.
That would be funny.
Which I assume after the game would probably involve George getting a 5th fine from the NFL later on.
That's okay. That one would be worth it, because that would be entertaining.
Yeah, that one I might start a GoFundMe for him to pay the fine.
Yeah. But you know what? We haven't given our score prediction yet.
Sure,
what might have to happen is both of our offensive predictions might need to be correct, and we need to see at least 5 touchdowns in this game for the Steelers to win.
Yeah. Let's go through some of the predictions we have from the chat before we get into ours. Monongahela Mike, Steelers by 6. Elliott seals the game with a pick. Boston, 34-23 Bengals. Steelers more self-inflicted wounds. Pass rush doesn't get home like it's supposed to. He specifically calls out Broderick Jones with the self-inflicted wounds, though. Kobe, 2 sacks from TJ, kind of on the same page as you. I think you're giving him another half or so on that sack total, though.
Mm-hmm.
Fields touchdown is a lock, also, says Boston. So he's got the Steelers losing, but he's got a Justin Fields touchdown within there. Calling it a lock is interesting. I like that. I like the how confident you are in the Justin Fields touchdown happening. All right, so let's get into do you want me to go first on the score? Because you went first.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, maybe you can raise everybody's hopes after I give mine, because I actually have the Cincinnati Bengals winning this football game. I really hate this matchup on paper, man. Like, I think the way that Cincinnati can spread out a defense, and because we haven't seen it happen yet with this personnel group, I think that's what is causing me to have so much fear in terms of this matchup for the Steelers. Like, we haven't seen with this grouping them be able to defend this offense yet. So until they answer that, I'm going to have concern about their ability to do so. I just think Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are too explosive. Joe Burrow is too good in terms of the ability to process the game. He's the best, in my opinion, he's the best quick game processor in the NFL. Not saying he's the best quarterback in the NFL, but that specific aspect of it, getting the ball out of his hands quick, knowing where he wants to go off that first read, I think he does it better than anybody in the NFL. The one caveat of this, the one thing I'll say is I'm curious to see how that wrist responds in cold weather, because that's kind of been made a talking point.
Didn't he say he didn't feel good this week?
Yeah, we were talking about that on, like, Derek had a take on that as well. Like, if you ever listen to Joe's post game stuff, he's just like never happy with his performances, like regardless of what he does. Like this year, if he had a better defense, he's in the MVP conversation with the way that he's played, but you would never know it. Like, I understand that the team results going to play into that too, but like even in years past, he's never like talked good about an own performance. I just think he's very self-critical. So like that could just be a case of that. So Tristan's predictions, Jamar goes for 150 in a loss. But yeah, so to me, I got this 33-28 Cincinnati. Again, like I think it's going to take the Steelers scoring 30 plus to win this game. I think they are able to put up some points, but they don't quite get there. That's ultimately what's going to be cost them. I actually think that we're going to sit back on this one though and say the Steelers held them relatively in check. Like they're going to give up 33 points and we're going to be like, yeah. But anyways, 33-28 Cincinnati.
I mean, I got to say, like with Tristan in the chat saying like Jamar goes 150 in a loss, like I would not care if Jamar had like a 50-point fantasy point performance if it meant in a loss. And that's why I think that going back to what we just talked about in the beginning, talking about the defense,
done.
Like you,
I don't even know if that's a bold prediction.
Like you cover T. Higgins and then you just allow Jamar to do what he does and just contain everybody else.
I guess he's only gone over 150 twice, so okay. I guess that would be, but
only twice.
Yeah, one of those was 264. The other was 193.
Was
both against Baltimore.
264 and 3 touchdown game against Baltimore.
Yeah, and the other one was 193 and 2 against Baltimore.
Yeah, that's rough. I will lift people's spirits because I genuinely think that the Steelers need a get right game. Even though they have won 2 out of their last 3 coming out of the bye, I just feel like we have a sour taste in our mouth offensively about this team. You look at what they did at times in that Washington game, not a great performance from the offense despite putting up 28 points. And then you move on to Baltimore where you win with 6 field goals. I'm never going to complain about winning, but the offense did not look great in that game. They did just enough to get into field goal range, but let's be real. Basically crossing the 50 is field goal range for Chris Boswell, so that's not all that impressive either. And then you have that penultimate game on Thursday night against the Browns where you get the magical snow game. Wasn't so magical for the Steelers offense. It was too little too late, and they weren't able to get it done. Didn't look very good. I think that this Steelers team needs a get-right game. I think this is a defense to do it against. I think this is the place where the Steelers have had some decent performances in Cincinnati. It's not like unheard of for the Steelers to go into Cincinnati and win, is really what I'm trying to say. And so I feel like this needs to be like a nail in the coffin for the Bengals' playoff chances. I think that this has to be done because nobody wants to see the Bengals in the playoffs. No AFC team wants to see the Bengals in the playoffs. They would, like I mentioned in the beginning, they would be the biggest threat to anybody that is like the 2 or the 3 seed. However, the standings would have ended up shaking out. They are the biggest threat to be had for one of those top seeds who would be playing them in the first round. But I think the Steelers get right. I think that they get a lot of points in this game, which is something that they haven't done in a few weeks. And I'm going to say that the Steelers win this one 34-31. A late field goal from Chris Boswell is going to get it done.
I love it. One of us has to be right, and I hope it's you. But certainly with everything that you said, I think Cincinnati's one of the 6 best teams in the AFC, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make the playoffs. Like you said, let's put the nail in the coffin this week. If they suffer their 8th loss, it's going to be like we think they have no margin for error right now. Denver or LA could certainly end up 9-8. And it would be, which one is going to make the playoffs between Cincinnati and one of those teams. If that happens, they still have to play each other. Well, Cincinnati doesn't play. They already played LA, right? If they play each other. Did that happen?
Yeah, they played each other. Chargers beat them.
Okay. So, I remember that game now. But they still have to play Denver. So, I guess I'm just trying to think what we want to have happen here to end up where it's LA and Denver. And obviously those two just went out.
Yeah,
but
realistically, just went out. And I'll say that especially for Denver because my brother-in-law is a Denver fan. So, Denver went out.
Which, by the way, no one would have expected that before the season. I mean, even if you like Sean Payton as a coach and stuff like that, and we're relatively higher on Bo Nix than most people, I mean, come on. Like, not in year one.
I mean, shout out to my brother-in-law, Fisher. I am starting to get on the Bo Nix for Rookie of the Year train. Jaden Daniels the past several weeks has not looked like he did in the first half of the season. And I think that there's more steam going towards Bo Nix way as the season's been going along.
For me, it's Brock Bowers, despite the team success.
Man, he's not going to win. He's a tight end. We know that.
But I'm just saying he's the best offensive rookie.
No, yeah. I understand that. But we pick winners in this. We don't pick hopefuls.
Yeah. I think it's going to still be Jaden Daniels. In my mind, it should be Brock Bowers.
Okay.
Bo Nix has played better than Jaden Daniels over the last few weeks. Sure. I still think by the end of the year, it's going to be Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
Anyways, let us know your predictions in the real quick. Tristan said you guys worried about JPJ. In general, no. For this game, potentially depending on how he's deployed. I would not want him lined up with Jamar Chase just going like if he's going to cover Jamar in some capacity, sure. But ultimately what I think their best plan of attack is have him just take away T. Higgins, let him be 1v1 versus him, and have a committee dedicated to Jamar Chase. If they have him just shadowing Jamar Chase, I think that's where this prediction potentially comes to fruition.
Yeah.
It's a bad matchup. Like there's certain guys that give him fits, like certain types of receivers, in my opinion, that give him fits, and they give everybody fits. But just stylistically, Jamar Chase is the type of receiver that he's going to give every cornerback fits, obviously, but specifically Joey, I think would have a tough time with him. And I'd take away T. Higgins and commit a lot of resources to stopping or limiting Jamar Chase.
Also, 2 things. Bed Creeksmore. I don't think that is Tristan.
That's Tristan.
Creeksmore. Oh, is it?
It is. He moved over from Twitch to YouTube.
I was going to say we have a Twitch viewer, which is like something I haven't seen in a long time. But since that's Tristan, I understand now that is he moved over to YouTube. I get it. But I was just surprised that we got a Twitch follower or Twitch viewer. And then also Boston. Why are we putting this in the energy? Like if BYU loses by 10 today to Houston, I'm probably not going to be around to watch the Steeler games tomorrow. So let's just chill out with that. Okay.
Keep in mind you have a baby on the way Monday, so let's just keep that in the back of our minds here. But anyway, appreciate you guys in the live chat. Even if you're watching this back, be sure to comment your predictions for how you think this game is going to go. Any bold predictions you might have. So let us know on that. Follow us everywhere at Around the 412. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when a new episode is posted. Or we do one of these live on a Saturday. We'll be back. Who do we got next week? Cleveland, right? Coming to Pittsburgh.
Cleveland.
So we'll be back next Saturday for another Steelers Saturday Sit Down to preview the game against Cleveland Browns. Until then, for Smitty, for Tyler, this has been another Steelers Saturday Sit Down. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.